Let's talk little bit about templating. Um, Nowadays, uh, server-side rendering uh, has lost a little bit of its flair for single-page apps, right? Especially now with Angular and of course React and Vue, which became surprisingly very popular in the last year and is still growing very, very fast. There is still space for server-side rendering, despite the fact and the achievements of web crawlers. Server-side rendering is still the best way for is still more SEO friendly, right? So, and a lot of times you really don't need that dynamic concept, that dynamic capability of uh, libraries and frameworks like React and Vue, right? Take for example GitHub, right? It's heavily server-side rendered, so uh, we can still do a lot of things with server-side rendering and getting the SEO benefits, right? Go has a package for templating, right? It's package template. I recommend you to read the whole documentation. It's it's kind of short, but I came from a JavaScript background, so I used to love EJS, which is embedded JavaScript, and I know for Ruby you have what is it, ERB, and you would simply open a tag and put percentage sign, and you would write regular JavaScript to your template, and it would be very easy, right? But this template package here, it's it's not exactly writing Go in your HTML, right? So it's more or less it's a language of its own, okay? So you can see here, right, that you have it divides, right? It divides um, the valuation of data. It takes as arguments and pipelines. So here it explains, what pipelines are, and it's more or less like you have your if statements, you have your range, and etc. etc. And then explains what are arguments, right, which are evaluations of data, and it goes on here with pipelines, and it explains how you write variables, etc. etc. Uh, One very, 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 very interesting uh, things I've found about this is the use of the pipe operator. Let me see if I can find it here. It's somewhere. So it's very, I imagine it's very useful. I didn't put in this project, but I intend to use it because it seems here that a pipeline may be changed by separating a sequence of commands with the pipeline character, right? Which is if you used to write, bash scripts and all that, you can pipe the result of one operation to feed the next one, right? So this is very interesting. And another thing you should be careful is your functions, right? So you have here a set of global functions, and you have, look, for example, the Boolean negation, right? Or the OR operation here. Of course, length, which is equal to go. And you also have the set of binary comparison operator. So this is the equals, right? The not equal, the greater than. So you have to be careful. I highly recommend you to read this documentation. It's short, but it will make life easier. So no, let's go here. So this is our Magic Soup project. I'm going to log in as our famous user one, put in the also famous 1234 password, and I'm going to do a walk around with the code for this template here, right, which is our index.html. So basically, this is just a form, nothing special here. This is where I'm heading, right? So here I have these generated texts, right, or recipes based on the soups that were created here: name, country of origin, and ingredients, if it's spicy or not. And you see we have the delete button, right, which means that uh, this soup, I have the ID for the user that created it, and also I send back this ID so I can compare, so that I can show or not the delete button if this person was the one who created this soup. Okay, so let's go to the code because it's easier this way. So first of all, I'm gonna go to main here. I only have two templates, right? This is the login template, which is the login page, and this is the index template, right? So I have it on static, and some people write the extension Go HTML, and I kind of don't like it. I like standard uh, naming of files extensions, right? So I only have two templates, uh, and what does a template do exactly? I'm gonna get my index handler here, okay? So a template, basically, it gets an HTML file and it bounds it with data, right? So basically, so you execute, right? So I have my index template, which uses the index HTML, and I pass some data to it, and it writes to the writer. Okay, so that's basically it. You have a HTML file that receives some data, and it's written to the writer. Okay, no big deal. So if we go here, I have my models, right? And one of the models is a response. Okay, so this is the model, the response. It's a struct, obviously, that I use to pass on to the templates. So I have a user ID, okay, uh, a success message, and to be honest, it's mostly fail messages that I'm passing here, but it's okay. And I also have a field called soups, which is a slice of soup. And soup is another struct, right? That when we create a new soup, it gets an ID, it gets a name, an origin, if it's a boolean, if it's spicy or not. It gets a slice of strings, which are the ingredients, a created by, right, which is an ID, which is a string, and a timestamp. Okay, so my response has these three fields, and one of them is this kind of struct here, right? It's kind of embedded. So in my main function, when I call the index handler, right? So when I make a get request, index handler is called, right? I get all the soups, right? So it's my controller package function get all soups. It returns me uh, a slice of soups, okay, which I call here results. This is just cookies. I get the user. I get from this user session package from the session map that I created. So I get the user. So I get his ID here. So I have the soups and the user for that request. And then I instantiate this struct, right? I create a response, right? So I get my model and my response with that user's ID and the slice of soups, right? And I send that data to be uh, executed with this HTML index.html. Okay, so now let's go to index.html. So this is my template, right? It's index.html. So here I have a lot of assets and front-end stuff. That really doesn't matter now. But here we start, okay? The first thing I want to do, so I sent here, let me just give some space. I sent here that response, right? Response. And that was a struct, right? And that response had the fields of user ID, success message, and soups, right? So it's user ID. I'm gonna get it. I'm not gonna care about success message now, okay? Because I'm not using it here. And soups, right? So these are the two fields I have: user ID and soups. Okay, just keep this in mind. So that struct, that response struct that I passed on to this template, I can access it here. Okay, so this period here is this, where is it again? This period here is this response, okay? This period is this response. Let me take this out. So, if I want to access, let's say, let me get a user ID, I would go period user ID, okay? If I want to access soups, this is my VS Code working. If I want to access soups, it's period soups, okay? So this is why I'm assigning period, meaning the response struct, I'm assigning to this variable. So this is the signature for assigning variables, named outer context. Okay, so I'm assigning that response struct to this variable, and you're gonna see why in a minute. So here we have the form, right? It's enter your soup. We have enter your soup, so this is the form, blah blah blah, blah blah blah. And here are our soups, right? So here are our soups. This is when we start putting data in our template. So the first thing I do here is with, okay? So let's remember that our response has this a string, a field user ID a string, the success message a string, and a soups field, which is a slice of soup, which has an ID field, a name, origin, spicy, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I am, just to make life easier, I am kind of changing the context, but, well, let's forget context for a while. I am assigning, right, This soups for the period. So remember, up here, the period meant the response, okay? Now, when I use with, right, the period, this period here are the soups that are inside the response, okay? So it's easier for us to work this way. So now the period is not the response anymore, the soups are. So I assign with, and I have to close this somewhere down there. I'm going to close this, okay? And I range. So now these are the soups, and I range, okay? So why is this with easy? So instead of going period, which was the response, dot soups dot name, I can only go and say dot name, okay? If I didn't have this with here, I would have to go period dot soups dot name. And of course, range would be range dot soups, right? So this is convenient, right? So, and so here I have name, and in the individual soups, right? So here, I have these three pattern texts, right? Which are or recipes that they vary as the number of the ingredients. Okay, so what am I doing here? Remember, this equal here is a function, right? Remember here we got, right? So this is a function. So we can't write something like if x equals y, right? No, it won't work. You have to pass them as arguments, okay? So what I do here is I pass the ingredients to the length function, right? So it's going to give me the number. So first this is evaluated, right? Length is a function and receives the ingredient slice. So this will be evaluated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 0, right? And then this equal function will receive the argument of this evaluation and 1. So if this turns out to be 1, right? This turns out to be 1. 1 equals 1. We're going to pass name here, origin here, and this index is a way to access a slice or an array by its index, okay? It's also a function. So I get if this is evaluated to 1, right? The function EQ will receive 1 and 1. It'll turn out to be true. This if here is going to render this. I'm going to get the name, the origin, and on the ingredient slice, this function here, the first argument is the slice, and this is the index I want to access. So it's going to get index 0 of this slice, okay? And here again, if I have a spicy, meaning if it's true, it's going to render this text here. This end here is for this statement here, okay? So, and then The same here is else if, the same thing, right? I'm going to evaluate the length of the ingredients. I'm going to, the EQ function will see if it's equal to 2. If so, this text will be rendered and we're going to access here, right? We're going to access index and of the ingredients slice. And now, if I evaluating the ingredient slice, pass into the GT function, meaning greater than. So if this is greater than 2, this text will be gone. Then I'm going to range the ingredients, okay? And this and here is relative to this range, because you see these pipelines. Let's see here. See, you have to put an end to this if here, right? You have to put an end. When you have an else, you only put at the end, right? And if you have an else if, you only end it at the end. But you have to close these pipelines, okay? So I'm ranging here and I'm closing this pipeline, okay? This if will be this if else, these if and if else will be closed here, right? And you see we have to close everything. This is where I'm using my outer context variable. So I do the same thing, right? I pass to the EQ function, which is equal, the user ID from my outer context, meaning from my response, okay, that I got from the session map. And I'm comparing it with the created by from the soup, okay? So again, here I'm using the outer context user ID, which I got from the response struct, that first response struct that was passed to the template, and I'm comparing it with the created by, which is an ID also, that I get from the soup struct, that I'm accessing only by the period because I'm using the with soups, okay? And this is to render the delete button or not. And basically that's it for templating. Just take a good read at this documentation here. It's really not difficult, and I'm sure you can get a hang of it easily and server-side render your Go projects. Thank you.